Good evening, and I think this is speech number 4. So today, my speech is going to be on an event in history. And in case nobody didn't know, and I didn't know, was that this is the guy right here that I'm going to do my report on. His name is Chiniwa Sugihara, right here. And a lot of people may not even never heard of him. I never heard of him until I was doing a report on something else, and I came across his name. And I tell you what I really want to do a report about is because most Americans they know of Oscar Schindler. He was the German businessman who saved more than 1,200 lives during the Holocaust by hiring, Jewish people to work in his facilities, in his factories, and fought the Nazis to remove them. But people don't know who Chinua Sugihara was. Well, he was actually a Japanese diplomat that was working in Lithuania at the time, and he disobeyed his government's orders and issued visas that allowed 6,000 Jews to escape from Nazi-occupied territories and make their way to Japan. And his family was, uh, they were also with him, and uh, he helped several thousand Jews, like I said, and they could travel to Japan, but most of the Jews who escaped were refugees from German-occupied Western Poland or Russian-occupied Eastern Poland, as well as residents of Lithuania. So he wrote travel visas that facilitated the escape of more than 6,000 Jewish refugees to Japanese territory, risking his career and his family's lives. They also called him, but over there the Jewish people knew him as Sempo, and he became in 1939. He became a vice consul at the Japanese consulate in Lithuania, and his duties included reporting on Soviet and German troop movements, and to find out if Germany planned an attack on the Soviets, and if so, to report the details of the attack to his superiors in Berlin and Tokyo. Chinui Sugihara also was fluent in Russian, uh, the Russian dialect, and he had cooperated with Polish intelligence as part of a bigger Japanese-Polish cooperative plan, and without the visas, it was dangerous to travel. But it was impossible to find countries willing to issue them. So hundreds of refugees came to the Japanese consulate in where he was staying and trying to get a visa to Japan. But and it was on the brink of war. Lithuanian Jews made up 1/3 of Lithuania's urban population, half the residents of every town as well. So the Dutch, they provided some of them with an official third destination to Curacao or Curacao, a Caribbean island, and the Dutch colony required no entry or visa at the time. Uh, and then the Japanese government required that visas be issued only to those who had gone through the appropriate immigration procedures and had enough funds. But most of the refugees didn't even fit the criteria because the Germans took all their money and they had nothing. They were like a lot more penniless. So Sugihara, he contacted his Japanese foreign ministry 3 times for instructions. And each time the ministry responded that anybody granted a visa should have a visa to a third destination to exit Japan, with no exceptions. So from July 18th to August 28th of 1940, he was aware that applicants were in danger if they stayed behind. He began to grant visas on his own. And after consulting with his family, he ignored the requirements and issued Jews with 10-day visa to transit through Japan, and he was in violation of his orders. And given his inferior post and culture of the Japanese Foreign Service bureaucracy, this was an act of disobedience. And he spoke to Soviet officials who agreed to let the Jews travel, if they take the Trans-Siberian Railway at 5 times the standard ticket price. That's crazy. So they offered, so he began handwriting visas, spending 18 to 20 hours a day on them, producing a normal month's worth of visas each day. until September 4th, when he had to leave his post before the consulate was closed. And by that time he had granted thousands of visas to Jews, many of whom were heads of households and thus permitted to take their families with them. According to witnesses, he was still handwriting visas while in transit from his hotel, and after boarding the train, he was throwing visas out into the crowd of desperate refugees out the train's window, even as the train pulled out. But in final desperation, blank sheets of paper with only the consulate seal, the consulate seal and his signature, that could be later written over into a visa, they were prepared and just flung out from the train. As he prepared to depart, witnesses said, "Please forgive me, I cannot write anymore. I wish you the best." And he bowed deeply before him, and someone explained, "Sugiharu will never forget you. I'll see you again." And that's when a lot of story, when he goes back into Japan, he took a job to support his family. He had a wife and 3 sons, and he took a series of menial jobs. At one point he was selling light bulbs door to door, and he suffered a tragedy in 1947 when his youngest son died at the age of 7. And in 1968, an economic attaché to the Israeli embassy in Tokyo, and when one of the Sugiharu beneficiaries finally located and contacted him, and Nishri, his name was Joshua Nishri. He had been a Polish teen in the 1940s. So the next year, Sugiharu visited Israel and was greeted by the Israeli government. And the Sugiharu beneficiaries began to lobby for his inclusion in the Yad Vashem Memorial. And the Yad Vashem is he was granted the honor of the righteous among the nations, and that's given to somebody who that's not a Jew. That helped out to protect the Jewish people from the war. And he was granted that honor in 1985, but he was too ill to travel to Israel, so his wife and youngest son, accepted the honor on his behalf. And in that same year, 45 years after he was asked his reasons for issuing visas to the Jews, he explained that the refugees were human beings, and that he needed help. He said, what he said in his words, "You want to know what my motivation is, don't you? Well, it's the kind of sentiments anyone would have when he actually sees refugees face to face, begging with tears in their eyes. He just cannot help but sympathize with them. Among the refugees were the elderly and women. They were so desperate that they went as far as to kiss my shoes. Yes, I actually witnessed such scenes with my own eyes. Also, I felt at the time that the Japanese government did not have any uniform opinion in Tokyo. Some Japanese military leaders were just scared because of the pressure from the Nazis, while other officials in the Home Ministry were simply ambivalent." And this is him right here. And it says, "Do what is right, because it is right, and leave it alone." Chinua Sugiharu, Japanese consul to Lithuania in World War II. A hero to some. And to this day, over 40,000 members, over 40,000 descendants are living because of his actions. And some went on to become, his legacy produced doctors, bankers, lawyers, authors, politicians, even the first Orthodox Jewish Rhodes Scholar. So I just thought everybody should know who he is, because I never knew about him. I thought it was just, I never knew that Jews ended up in Japan, ended up in Latin America, ended up in other places. I thought these, just like certain parts of Europe and the United States. So he's a hero in my book. So thank you for listening. Have a good day.